right. Welcome to another episode of the Always Adaptive podcast. My name is Randall James. This is episode number 2. And this time I have a guest. Her name is Amelia Moore. Amelia, how are you doing?
I'm excellent. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Who are you and what do you do?
So I am a retired Team USA boxer, now turned professional, and recently signed with CES on my way to World Takeover.
Awesome. Yeah, and just to give you guys a little bit of her background, she was a 2016 Tokyo Olympic qualifier. In 2017, she won the National Golden Gloves champion in the women's 141-pound weight class. Gold medals at the Elite National Championships and National PAL that same year. In 2018, she was a top finisher in the European Boxing Confederation, and then she won her second national title in December 2021. And she's also now officially 1-0 for her pro debut. Amazing job.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Yep. I've been punching people in the face all around the world for almost a decade now.
That's amazing. So there is a question I want to ask you later, but I figured I want to ask it now. How do you feel about MMA and like that whole mixed thing? Like, would you ever go consider that or?
It's crazy how often I actually get asked that question. So, and this is usually how I phrase it. It's like, there's a lot of people that IndyCar and NASCAR are not the same sports. Like, both go vroom, but doesn't mean that they're the same sport. And that's kind of how I feel about MMA. You really gotta love what you do to get punched in the face or take that risk. 4-ounce gloves are even smaller than 8-ounce gloves, and then to add kicks in it. I'm not, as much as moving over from the amateurs, that was like my passion, the growth and everything to be able to build to this point. Man, it's just like my heart really doesn't call to MMA, and like I don't know if even if it was presented with a huge amount of money, that's what I'd want to do. So I don't know. I love boxing. It speaks to me, and that's why I'm in this field. There's a lot of women, especially, I mean, you're seeing Clarissa Shields, Amanda Serrano started, Heather Hardy, all huge names. Savannah Marshall. There's a ton of women that transfer over to both, but I don't know. It's not an interest of mine. It's kind of like bare knuckle. I've seen so many people transfer over to bare knuckle. Dude, I'm good. I'm here for the sweet science. It's what speaks to my soul. It's what I want to do, and I want to be at the best at that. So not that I wouldn't train,
Yeah.
I would totally train. I've trained wrestling, how to do it when I was in the military. I trained jiu-jitsu. I had a partner in the past that was a pro MMA fighter and an amazing jiu-jitsu coach. So love it. Appreciate it. Not for me.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. I view like all of the different exercise modalities as the same way. It's like kettlebells speak to me. Olympic weightlifting didn't do it for me. Powerlifting didn't do it for me. Bodybuilding didn't do it for me. And it's just like, I just love kettlebells. There's something about just throwing kettlebells around. So there has to be a passion there. I totally agree with that. But yeah, so qualifying for the Olympics, can you tell me a little bit about that? And also your pro debut, like what has that been like? I know you were just talking before we started about kind of like your podcast circuit and all that stuff, but just say a little bit about, the attention you've been getting, the training leading up to both of those moments, the difference between maybe the Olympics versus your pro debut and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been on 3 Olympic cycles now. I was qualified an Olympic trialist for the 2016 and then was the Olympic alternate for the 2020 games. And so 3 Olympic cycles. My second Olympic cycle ended up being an Olympic alternate. And then this last one is actually where I stepped out, decided to make the transition into pros. I was number 1 seed at 57 kilos. So it's pretty wild. I actually just posted that even at this point with all these accolades, a multi-international medalist, Olympic alternate, multi-time national medalist, I have all of these accolades, and it wasn't until I made this transition within this last 9 months. I did a combat league, which was kind of like a semi-pro thing as my like midway transition, was able to commentate on DAZN, went 10-0, took Rookie of the Year with Team Combat League. And then it gave me the opportunity to be able to have a really smooth transition into the actual traditional pro pipeline and circuit. So it's nuts because just in the last 2.5 months, and even in the last like week and a half after, the official announcement of my signing with CES Boxing, which is the promotional agreement and the team I'm with, which is a fantastic regional pipeline into like the bigger promotions. They I've had more opportunities presented like that have come navigated my way than I did in the 12 years that I was with on the pipeline of Team USA. And I was on the team for 6 years. I was either a 1 or a 2 on the national international competition team for 6 years straight. So it's just wild to me, like that side of the pipeline. It's tournament style. You fight anywhere between 3 to 6 times. National championship, or excuse me, international, the world's championships is over 10 days long. So you're holding that weight for every day that you fight, you weigh in. It's
Yeah.
crazy, like
Yeah.
especially if you're cutting a big amount of weight. And so that's why it's so important to kind of live at that weight. So there's some differences in that avenue, but even with the type of support that is coming into it, I was speaking to somebody yesterday about, why is there this huge difference between the two, the true amateur and the true pro, because boxing is really one of the last of the sports that's truly amateur. I mean, like skiing, you're either sponsored or you're not. That's really the distinguisher between pro and amateur, or pro and, not elite or not pro. So,
Yeah.
um, but with that, it's just like, why are those opportunities kind of like not coming to you? So, using the amateurs is really just building that experience, getting the international experience, doing camps in other countries, and really kind of building those accolades. And it's like that hard schooling time to be able to make sure that you are at a place where you're so skilled and talented and you've seen it all, so that you can easily transition into a place where you can make it more of a career. So that's where I'm at. It's like going from, I graduated with my master's and now I'm going into, to my own practice. And like, that's how I kind of
Yeah.
see the professional ranks now for myself.
Okay. Yeah, that's awesome. I love it. You had posted on the weight cut topic that you mentioned. You had
Yeah.
posted a video, and I can't remember exactly what it was, but you were talking about like fueling proper nutrition and stuff, something along those lines. And
Yeah.
I had messaged you like, please, like, keep talking about this because we need more people to talk about that. It's like it's more prevalent than people realize, like with REDS syndrome, relative energy deficiency in sport, and then that leads to potentially osteoporosis. I'm actually interviewing a guy in December out in the UK. He's a marathoner, very fast guy. He's 26. He ended up with osteoporosis. And so, like, he got 2 stress
Yeah.
fractures, and then he went to the doctor, and they're like, "Dude, you have osteoporosis." So, that's that type of thing. Do you know, like, is that prevalent in boxing? I know weight cuts are
Yeah.
brutal. Yeah,
1,000%. Yeah. I've actually, this is, it's so great that we're coming together right now and being able to like have like a long form conversation, actually kind of put some information out there. Cause this is my passion project. I mean, 1,000%. I truly feel, and like, whether it's an unpopular opinion, it shouldn't be, combat sports, boxing, MMA, even wrestling, the combat sports are still functioning and running on a completely archaic and outdated, I wouldn't even say outdated, unfounded principles when it comes to um, energy, calorie intake, fueling, and that deficiency. So we're looking at a lot of athletes. And I love the fact that you're actually going to speak to a male, because a lot of times where we find the conversation coming up is with women and being like, oh, well, now you have amenorrhea. Well, amenorrhea is, for people who don't know, is when a female loses their cycle, whether that's due to stress, calorie deficiency, so on, so on. And so really amenorrhea is that's the last stop, or one of the last stops. I mean, that is a product of REDS, and having
yeah.
that severe caloric deficiency, and energy deficiency. So yeah, so I'm fantastic that you're actually speaking to men, because I feel like that is not highlighted enough.
Yeah, and to that point about Amena, there's also what is it, Aligo too. So it's like the warning signs before where your menstrual cycle starts to drop off a little bit, and then people kind
Yep.
of ignore that. Like bodybuilders I know when they're doing, they're trying to drop their calories or 500, they're in a deficit. And
Insane.
that's the first thing that they'll say is like, oh, my periods are irregular or something. And they don't really think about it. It's like you're so nutritionally deficient that your body's kind of in panic mode right now. So yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's pretty crazy how little talk there is about people that get into fitness fueling more for performance, like eat to
Yeah.
perform. Did you ever hear about that movement, eat to perform, way back in the day?
No, but I mean, that is a tagline that I spit out more than I can tell you. Like even on like my day to day, and they're like, how do you eat? And I'm like, well, I eat to perform. So, it's not about, function over fashion kind of. So yeah, no, but please go on.
No, that's all I was going to say. But
Okay.
yeah. So do you have any like personal experience with that? Has that ever happened to you, Reds or
No,
anything?
absolutely. So, and I especially, so I originally came into the national scene at 141 pounds. And then as the Olympic cycle had started to approach closer and closer, I moved down to an Olympic recognized weight class because not all of the weight classes are recognized at the games. So I went down from 141 pounds down to 132, which is 60 kilos. So that's a recognized weight class. It was the closest one to me. And for me, it made more sense to go down than to go up because at the time it was 165, and that's from 141 to 165. That's outrageous.
Yeah.
So I went down in weight. And then as time went on, after leading up to the 24 games, I actually went to world championships in 2022 at 57 kilo, which is 125. I'm 5'8", so a huge feat to be able to tackle. And not only that, I mean, I had experienced poor weight cut, and you have to, and I think this is again why this is becoming such a passion project for me, because I'm looking at over 12 years of competition time and looking at back and being like, wow, so many mistakes were made because it was a trial by fire. It wasn't there wasn't the education. And at the time, I mean, especially then, even now, it's like there's not always the financial resources to be able to have somebody guide you through that. So it's really a trial by fire. And how driven are you to be able to find the information on your own? And so it became, I just wanted to be, I knew that edge was what was going to put me over the top and put me ahead of other people if I could get my body, my performance up, and make those weight cuts easier. And so, I mean, I even have experienced rhabdo in the past. I've experienced amenorrhea for extended periods of times, 9+ months. And obviously with that hormonal disruption, you're going to see cases where osteoporosis do become a factor. And that's something that is the risk the long term. But even before that, especially at 125, when I was making 57 kilo, I my energy expenditure was so high. I mean, I was doing about 2 hours of cardio. I would have boxing practice and we'd have a shakeout in the morning. I'd have boxing practice at 10 a.m. After boxing practice, I would get right on either the treadmill or the elliptical to do an additional hour of cardio, a sauna and a stretch, ice plunge, go eat, strength and conditioning at 3 or 4 o'clock, and do another 45 minutes to an hour of cardio at night. And
Oh
that's what
my
it took
God.
for, dude, it was crazy. I mean, I was burning easily almost 35 to 4,000 calories a day, and I was intaking like 12 to 16. And the problem is like, here I am on on our NGB, national governing body, for an like within the Olympic pipeline. And we had registered dietitian, and they never talked about expenditure. And so over a course of time, I started getting my fingers and feet. I started having the inability to deal with cold. We live in Colorado. I snowboard during the winter, on weekends when I'm not training. And I would be at nighttime, I'd be sleeping with socks on, and my like extremities would start getting really cold. I had no ability to adapt to the cold outside. And so I started digging into it, and I was like, God, like, what the hell is happening to me? I feel like hell. And I started to realize that due to this long-term deficit, okay, so your body eventually, if you do not have enough energy to be able to meet your base metabolic need, your body will actually start to deregulate, and it affects your thyroid. Your thyroid will actually start to deregulate so that it kind of like throttles everything down so that you can survive long term. And everything adapts to that. I mean, mitochondrial function, you'll look at your mitochondrial actually like all the condensed ones start to like merge into one singular one, and they get longer within the cell to create endurance and efficiency. Dude, I nerded out on it because I felt such crap at the time. And so this long-term deficit ends up hormonal disruption, and it's your thyroid. And then for females, it's like we get into this dysregulation hormonally with our cycle. And it goes so far that it's like even before amenorrhea, if you are not cycling as a female and you're creating estrogen, but you're under so much stress that you don't have enough energy to have a period, you don't actually create progesterone. And progesterone is the signal, the signal in order to allow yourself to cycle. So there's a bunch of things that happen with that for females. Is when you create progesterone, it also creates GABA. So GABA is another chemical and a hormone in the brain that downregulates cortisol. So,
Helps you sleep.
here it helps you sleep. It helps you get out of fight or flight. And here I am, and I call it monkey brain because I literally started to turn into a freaking basket case. My brain was just like, I'm in fight or flight all the time. I can't sleep. Like everything was just like hot wired at like such a high level that I couldn't come down. And after I ended up speaking to a female, she's one of like the lead physicians, and she's for sports, like I think she's an oncologist, but she's one of the leading physicians, Dr. Victoria Felker, and she is amazing. And she's the one who shared all this information with me. And she was like, oh my God, Amelia, like, and just so you know, and I told her, I was like, it's odd because I wear an Oura ring and I wear that specifically so I know what my cycle is. And I know that if I'm under fueling and overtraining, because my body temperature will start to get lower and lower and I won't cycle. And so Victoria Felker, I told her, I was like, I'm having this issue where it seems like every time I throw myself off, it takes me 3 months of cycle to get back. And she's like, well, that's correct. That's exactly right. Because it takes women 3 cycles to re-regulate once you have all of your calories and the stressor and the environment is back to normal. So, this is a long-term effect. There's no quick fix to this. It's so important to understand what your energy needs are and what your energy output is. Sorry, that was
Yeah.
so much I just like threw
No.
at you. It was just like,
No, that's amazing.
listen,
I love it.
I don't have the credentials at the end of my name, but like, please ask me something that I don't know. Cause it's just like, I've lived it. And I was so sick and tired of people not having answers for me. It's like, how do you have a master's degree and how do you not know what's going on with me? And that's the other part of like, if you have people who are working with these athletes, or even with the general population, I mean, my God, look at all these fad diets, but if they are not living the lifestyle, how the hell are you supposed to know? How do you put into practice something that you've never experienced when it's in this like very niche, small pool of a world? So, and I just like, this is not just the conversation, not just for pro or elite athletes. This is for everybody, like people of the world. Please, with your fad diet, stop starving yourselves. Like eat to perform. And like, if you have a goal, like if you do not eat, you will plateau and you will not see the results that you're looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, go off because it is a very important topic. And, like I've had experience with this too, unintentionally, where, I did intermittent fasting for something like 8 years and I loved it. Like I felt really good. And I think there lies the crux of it, is that people constantly say, well, I feel great. Like they'll do the keto diet and like, I feel great. They'll intermittent fast. I feel great. You know what I mean? But I lost like unintentionally, like my running was at its best. I was absolutely crushing my running, but same exact thing happened to me. My sleep took a major hit. Like I was just always in fight or flight mode. I'd wake up at like 2 a.m. and feel like I could go just run. And a lot of times I would just keep that cycle going and not like I wasn't thinking logically about it. But like it begs the question, like if you're skipping meals because you're fasting, do you really have enough time or instances of eating to get enough nutrition in the first place?
Yes. Yes.
And it's like,
I would say that that's the issue with the intermittent fasting is it's fantastic because it gives people those windows where they're not eating at nighttime. And that's why they feel so good, because their blood sugar and their insulin is not spiked at nighttime. So they're actually getting all of their cycles of sleep. But are you able to actually throw in all those calories in between those windows?
Yeah. Yeah. And carbohydrates, like carbs have been demonized like crazy lately. And it's like, how do you eat, how many carbs do you eat in your diet? What does that look like?
Yeah, so I actually carb cycle, and I would agree. And we've demonized carbs, but I think that it's also, I think that like putting them on that pedestal of like this is an evil thing, is really coming from like how people are trying to push back on like, or culture is pushing back on like sugar industry and processed foods. And yeah, that's all shit. You shouldn't be eating shit. You should be eating whole foods,
Yeah.
or as close to source as possible. I also was in that place because it was constantly weight cut. I was sodium phobic, carb phobic. Um, Tried keto for a while because I felt so bad in during training. And with the guidance of with the RDs, and I over time I found, I'm like, okay, well actually what I do now, I made, after so much research, I went and had a resting metabolic test. I know what my baseline macros are, and I also know that when you eat to perform, you also have to eat to what your expenditure is. So like I carb cycle on the days that I don't have to perform. I'm eating, I usually have a pretty baseline protein, but I might eat a little bit more fats and I bring my carbs down, because you don't need both. You need kind of like one or the other, or a balance. And then on days that I have to perform, I'm doing about 250 grams of carbohydrate, 134 grams of protein, right around there. Maybe like 64 grams of fats, depending. I'm not so strict with it anymore, but I carb cycle because,
Yeah.
again, it's like if I don't have a huge expenditure going out that day and it is a rest day and I'm just relaxing, why am I spiking my blood sugar? Like, why am I allowing insulin to open up those fat stores? Because for me, I don't want to open up and put fat on, or unnecessary water weight. So, obviously I think for me, like the big thing is like making sure you're getting enough protein at the end of the day, and nutrients, nutrient dense foods. That's the other thing. So like I carb cycle. I absolutely use carbs as fuel, making sure that I have enough protein, and then nutrient dense foods. I'll even do I do organ meats during hard cuts, because one of the things that I kind of live by is, you're not gonna, at the end of the day, if you are truly deficient, it's not going to be the deficiency of calories, it's going to be the deficiency of nutrients. And so I eat really nutrient dense foods in those windows where, you're 2 weeks, a week out from your weight into your weight cut, where you're from competition and you're not eating a lot, so you're not getting a lot of nutrients. So I'll eat liver. I'll eat like 2 times a week, because it's such a blood builder. It's so many B vitamins and all the things that you truly need to be able to keep yourself healthy. So yeah, I'm telling all my secrets today. So there's
Yeah,
gonna
your
be so many
rivals are
people that are
gonna.
like, I know, they're like, well, I don't know about the organ meats mill, but
Yeah, no, I mean that's pretty clear at this point that organ meats are so nutritionally dense, like it's silly to ignore that.
yeah,
But yeah, I mean, to your point, it seems like people just want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's like,
yeah,
oh, it's like carbs are evil. There's absolutely no use. Your body can run on fat, and they'll just say that, and that's the only
no,
statement. Your body can run on fat, so we don't need carbs. It's like, okay, now we got to get into the discussion about the intensity of the workouts that you're doing, because while that
yeah,
may be true, like if you're going glycolytic all the time, your body will eat your muscle away
yeah,
via gluconeogenesis if you don't have
yeah.
carbohydrate intake.
The
But people don't
body's
really,
so smart. Like the body, I
it
think people
is.
don't even realize it. It's like at the end of the day, your body is built to survive. I mean, we're made for the apocalypse. Where in the event that, I mean, think about how intelligent your body has to be like, okay, well, I can use carbohydrate as a fuel source. And then when it sees that it's deficient and it's used up all of your glycogen in your muscle stores in your liver, and then all of a sudden your liver goes, hey, we're out of fuel. And then it moves over to eating your muscle and literally turning protein into sugar. That's insane. Like
Yeah.
it's so beautiful and amazing. Like, so, but yeah, I mean, and then now you're risking performance, you're risking the gains that were so hard fought to be able to build at. So it's like, please eat.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's such an interesting topic, and I do hope it becomes less polarized soon. It does seem like there is a tide
Same.
starting to turn, like even us having this conversation right now. there seems to be more people kind of popping up and kind of coming to the defense of carbohydrates, good carbs, of course.
Good carbs, yeah.
Um, yeah, smart carbs is what they're called, but yeah, you and I also had I had posted a video, and I can't remember. I should have found all these from back then, but it was talking about running, and you had messaged me saying something about cardiac hypertrophy, and you and I ended up agreeing on the point, because I like to tell my runners, like, hey, if you want to do a marathon, that's fine, but like, let's not pretend that that's healthy for you. And like, there's a lot of data out there. There's a really interesting TED Talk. Have you ever seen a TED Talk by Dr. James O'Keefe? He was a cardiologist. This was like 12 years ago or something, about talking
Not
about
off the top,
marathoners.
not off the top of my head. I mean, honestly, I probably have, but I can't think of it at the moment.
Yeah, no, it was amazing. He basically talked about looking at chronic marathoners that have ran like 25 marathons in 25 years, and looking at their arteries, and basically their calcium score was off the charts. And like, basically you're looking at this, and it's like setting off all kinds of alarms for these
Yeah.
doctors. Like, you are this close to having a cardiac event, but those people, they're under, they think that, oh, I can run a marathon, I'm healthy, and
Right.
so
Yeah. And that's
you,
what everybody else's view is too. They're like, God, look at this athlete. They must be the epitome and the peak of health.
yeah, yeah. So I know you do a lot of cardio. I mean, you kind of just told us the secrets of your training protocols, but yeah, what does your cardio regime look like, and how do you kind of balance between, enough to keep you performing well, and then
Mhm.
not too much where you're kind of crossing into that red zone?
Yeah. I mean, again, like I've gone through so much trial by fire that it's uh actually looking to see what actually works and starting to follow the science behind it. It's crazy because when I was making 57 kilo and I was overtraining to the extent that I was, we get blood work through the training center. And so like it's pretty cool because I actually get to look at all of my data over the 6 years, because you get your blood work done either every quarter, every, half a year, every year, depending on what it was. And it was interesting because my my bad cholesterol started climbing. And that doesn't make any sense because I wasn't, and I couldn't figure out why. And so there were a couple other stress markers that were starting to increase. And you're like, God, here I am. I literally, I mean, I can run 12, 13 miles. I can spar 6, 10, 12 rounds, like literally at altitude. I'm training 2 to 3 times a day. I should be this like peak of health, but all of this stress was starting to, and really what it was is like all of this stress wasn't able to be balanced by, that expenditure wasn't being covered by the calories coming in because there wasn't enough calories coming in.
Yeah.
Um, so just looking at that, and it's like, well, I was doing that in order to do weight management. Now knowing what my body actually needs, it's like I can actually I've actually keyed a lot of stuff back and training more efficiently. And really being precise about, a lot of people are like, oh, I just heard a fighter. It was like the other day. It was just Friday night, on one of the OTX cards, and the commentators are talking about how the kid boasts about how he's in the gym for 5 hours every night. Why? Why are you in the gym for 5 hours every night? Like,
Right.
what are you doing? There's nothing's happening there. I mean, even like the science says that anything over 90 minutes, now you're anaerobic or aerobic, and anything under 90 minutes, depending what your heart rate zone is, that you're looking at these 2 heart rate zones. I mean, and then basically if you are at a high, like a zone 4, and you're over 90 minutes, you're now negating the training effect that you had. But if you're in zone 2 or
Bingo.
3, yeah. And like that's the efficiency of your workouts is what's key. And so I guess that's the point that I'm trying to get at is, we're looking at zone rate training, efficiency. And if we're in high zones, keep it simple, keep it short, keep it efficient. And if you're trying to do like a calorie burn and an endurance type or just like a maintenance workout and it's over 90 minutes, you're looking at that zone 2 and just really keeping it and low. But it's like the whole idea is, what are you doing? Make it efficient and make it make sense. So I'm so long-winded, and I'm sorry because it's just like I'm trying to
That's
like
okay.
explain why I've kind of changed things to how I'm doing them now, and that's I'm training more efficiently. I know what heart rate zones I'm in, and keeping those in those areas. So I would say I do about 2 to 3 long runs a week, usually 3 miles to 5 miles. I love to run. So there's times where it's just like, I'm going to go out and do 10 miles, but that's for me, that's what I like to do. And then also training around, what my performance aspect is, like where I am in my camp, like where, it's broken up into segments, built and sort of building, where you're creating this endurance block, and then you're creating this strength and power block, and then you're changing it as you're getting closer to peak performance, where you're shortening your window so that your recovery rate is being pushed, and you're pushing your body to recover faster, and you're really pushing that fast twitch. So it really depends on what cycle I'm in, but I still at a general, I do long runs 3 times a week. I do sprints 2 times a week. So looking at, you know, 4 to 5 running sessions a week. I like to run, and then strength and conditioning 2 to 3 times a week. And then I box 5 to 6. So, which usually it's 2 to 3 sparring sessions. Usually 2. Everyone likes to spar a ton. I really only like to spar 2 times a week. So people are going to be like, oh, you need to spar 3 times a week. There's people that spar back-to-back days, and I don't believe in that. I think that brain health is important. So
Absolutely. That's
brain
another,
rest.
yeah, like people don't talk about that enough either. Concussions and stuff in boxing.
Yeah.
But
That's a
no,
whole nother segment. I'd love to have another. We should hop on here and talk about concussion
yeah,
recovery and brain health. It'd be amazing.
totally. Yeah, absolutely. No, you brought up a really good point, and I would add, keep it simple, keep it specific, keep your
Yes.
training specific. And that's something I have a hard time getting across to people where, like, especially in the running space, traditional people would say that traditionally you should be running 5 to 6 days a week to train for a marathon. And thankfully, it's starting to come around that more and more people are starting to say, well, no, as long as you're very specific about your training stimulus and your adaptation that you're looking for, you can do 3 and maybe 1 recovery run. But people just want to add, they're called junk miles. They just want
Yep.
to add, they'll run 6 days a week. 3 of those runs, there's absolutely no target. They don't know what they're supposed to be
Yeah.
doing. They're running too hard for it to be a recovery run, but they're not running fast enough for it to, stimulate any sort of adaptation response. So it's like, I think that's even with power development. Do you do any power development in your training, explosivity,
Yeah.
medicine ball type stuff?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, even with the way my running is done, like with the sprints, like how do I, we're doing
Yes.
400s, and so that we can get that power lactic acid threshold. So yeah, I mean, we do medicine balls, throws. A lot of the time I forget the term, because there's there's a couple different styles or forms of, weightlifting that you have. And mine's really it's like a volume. It's a volume. Forget what the term is, but I do a lot of circuit training. And so that's the type of like power production stuff that I do.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're doing like more power endurance type stuff. And
Correct. Yep.
like people that are trying to, like, one thing I run into a lot is people don't rest enough for certain things. Now, in your case, it might
Yes.
not need that much rest because you're going for that endurance, but people do jumps, for example, and they'll start to lose their explosivity. They'll start to lose their power. Their speed will drop down, and they'll keep going. And it's like,
Yeah.
at that point, you're no longer training power because you're
Yeah.
slower.
You've
Like
lost
if you
that
want to,
adaptation at that point. Yeah.
right, exactly. And then to your point also, they'll do something the next day, junk miles, or they'll do something the same day, and now they've interrupted that recovery. They've interrupted that adaptation response. And it's like, I think more people just need to keep it simple, and be specific.
Yeah. I totally can. I've been, I am guilty of doing junk miles, like, or just like junk
Me
training.
too. Me too, by the
It
way.
I mean, I think that it's that old school principle of, you know, um, when you're resting, your opponent isn't, or, there's somebody out there that's more hungry than you, which is totally valid. This conversation isn't about, we're excluding the laziness factor, because we're in here doing the work, we're doing it efficiently. So, but, if you can put that mentality to the side, I've been out there doing extra stuff just because I think that it's giving me a mental edge. And so, but where, looking at that, like, where is the line between kind of like giving yourself that mental that mental edge and that kind of like that security that you're doing enough, and then not stepping over that line to where now you're basically ruining your workout and your efficiency and your recovery time for the rest of the week. So, looking at the whole training schedule instead of looking at just that individual segment. So that's another thing I think people need to, and that's the same with food too, like looking at the entire picture instead of just looking at today.
Yes. Yeah. Your carb intake is going to fluctuate based off of the style of training that you're doing.
Yep.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right. So sort of segue in here. I understand that you have suffered from Crohn's disease. Is that correct? Are you still suffering from that, or is that kind of in your
Um,
past?
so no, so Crohn's disease is an actual, it's a genetic disorder. And crazy part was I had blood work done when I was in the military, and it was one of the medical reasons that I ended up leaving and going on not going career. So I had blood work done, and then later, while I was at the training center, I went and actually had an endo and colon, and they were like, even though that your blood work showed this marker, what we're seeing is it's more of like an IBD case, a severe IBD case. So unheard of, but I sort of I don't even know how to explain that. A preemptive diagnosis, but the symptoms that I had been experiencing for years were so extreme. But yes, I do have IBD. It's something that I have worked for years and years to be able to regulate to a point where now I feel like a more normal human being, even under the stress load of training. So yes, thankful that I'm actually one of the few people that can actually say that they were like downgraded in diagnosis, which is insane. And I'm actually really thankful for that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's amazing. Yeah, it is a brutal disorder. I mean, like I mentioned to you, I have colitis, and
Yes.
I mean, to our earlier discussion about trying to get enough nutrients, that's
Yes.
like basically impossible when you're going through any sort of flare up. Like I remember when my flare up was at its worst, I dropped down to 167 pounds. I'm 183 now, but I dropped down to 167, and I was eating all day, Amelia. Like I could not eat enough, but it was just
Wow.
I couldn't hold on to it. But thankfully I was able to get it under control. Do you have any like tips or advice for people that may be going through something like that maybe,
Yeah.
helped you?
No, absolutely. I mean, I was on all of the steroids at 10 years ago. I was on Humira, mind you, like looking to the place that we are now after doing.
Glucocorticoid steroids, people, not
Yeah.
not anabolic
Oh
steroids.
yeah, no, no, not PEDS, not PEDS. It's on all the steroids. That's why I look the way I do. No. Oh God, clip that out. So I was on Humira. So yeah, and I mean, I felt like a pincushion. I mean, I was on, what I found was that inflammation itself is systemic. And when you're dealing with autoimmune conditions, it becomes systemic, and all of your systems start to get disrupted. So not only was my stomach, I was not getting enough nutrients. I was always tired, had like chronic fatigue. My immune system was complete trash because I was constantly sick. So not only was I not getting enough nutrients, but then I was constantly being put on antibiotics. My gut biome, my microbiome completely just got wiped out. Then we started getting reoccurring infections. On top of that, I'm on a steroid that is supposed to be taking away the inflammation, which is also making it even worse, and your risk to infection. So went through like a 5-year period that I was going through absolute hell, and still competing. And so kind of again at that point, like I feel like as much I've had really amazing doctors, and I've had doctors that are just on the pill mill and just trying to like prescribe. And for those physicians that are out there that are really interested in doing the investigative work and looking at the system and a person wholly and looking at everything systemically, thank you, because those are the people that kind of completely changed my life. And so I went from being at this place like completely in tears, years and years of being sick all the time, having brain fog, to I eventually came across a genetic specialist, a woman by the name of Amanda Archibald. She owns a company called Genomic Kitchen, or GK, and she was one of the first people that I was one of her first few clients. Actually, my case, she talked about my case in the New York Times when they did, I think, in the Washington Post, and they did an article on her. And since then, and they looked at everything. And so obviously a pretty expensive, journey with that, but it changed my life because each of us, we need to look at what's going on in our guts. We need, I did stool samples, I did blood, plasma, and gene testing, because your genes are the railroad tracks and kind of the suggestion of what's possible, but expressing them on or off, good or bad, is really the distinguishing factor of whether you're going to create health, and health span in your life. So understanding foods that maybe I shouldn't eat, understanding vitamin and mineral deficiencies, because, the big three, potassium, magnesium, and sodium, are what run every cellular function in your body. And so understanding those things, making sure your electrolytes are correct. You guys are not being, people are not being, please do not be sodium, so don't be scared of your sodium intake. Get a good electrolyte supplement. Make sure that you're getting enough magnesium, especially like a magnesium glycinate at nighttime, when you go to sleep, to help create better sleep patterns. I would say get enough fiber, where you are in your inflammation journey. It really depends, especially if you have colitis, and like how you're responding to that.
Yeah.
There's been so much research done on psyllium husk. Dude, I eat about 10 grams of psyllium in my protein shakes every single freaking morning. Psyllium and actually hemp fiber. So hemp fiber is insoluble, and then the psyllium husk is soluble. So, but the research on psyllium is actually like there's been replicated studies on this like over and over again, that this type of fiber is so beneficial to your gut bacteria, and it actually helps to reestablish and correct pH within the stomach and reestablish those colonies. So when you have been on a steroid and you've had flare-ups and you've got this inflammation actually increases a type of bad bacteria and a bad within the stomach. So we start to get these bacteria that actually help create these inflammations. And if you start to feed the good bacteria, you can actually start to combat those and help yourself kind of deregulate and bring those down. Obviously, this is just like, these are little pieces in the puzzle that can help the overall picture. It's not like I'm going to stop my medication because I'm doing psyllium husk now. It's hey, let's take a whole body approach and actually start to really support all of our systems so that we can actually function and we can eventually maybe move off of these meds. So that's my approach. I always do psyllium husk, lots of fiber, making sure that your electrolytes are correct. Magnesium's high enough, and glutathione. So glutathione production, I always do glutamine in my smoothies also. Amazing for gut health, amazing to be able to bring down inflammation systemically. Turmeric, I do, every now and then I'll do curcumin supplements. So I would say that like between magnesium, psyllium, and glutamine, those have been like my really big those are my big tools in my toolbox as of right now, and water intake and
Yeah.
sleep, you know,
Yeah.
sleep
Absolutely.
health for sure.
No, I mean, you bring up a good point with the fiber too, because it's definitely been my experience that depending on where I am in a flare up, I have to be very careful about what type of fiber that I intake.
Yes.
It's like you see something, you're like, oh, I can eat that. That's good for me. And
Yeah.
then you eat it and it
Like
makes it worse.
broccoli. You don't want to eat Brussels sprouts, guys. You've
Exactly.
got the sulfur,
Cabbage.
yeah, is it sulforaphane?
Yeah.
It's anyway, it's
Yeah.
gaseous. And so it's like, yes, it's an amazing fiber. It is great for the biome. But if you are in a place of like high inflammation, high triggering state, then you want to keep your body, you want to support that and still allow these processes to keep going, but you don't want to put more stressor into the system because it can't handle it. I always like, I equate it to a cup. So your cup of inflammation, like this is as much as you can handle within your system. And if your cup runneth overflow, that's when we have problems. So you
Yeah.
really want to make sure that like the vessel of the amount of stress that you have within your body is actually being maintained, because when it starts to overflow is when your body starts to create these systemic triggers, and kind of like it's going to come out somewhere,
Yeah.
and I kind of like to expound on that. Like when my stomach goes, and my inflammation starts to get, if I eat something bad or, because it's for me, I have high allergies, then it's going to get into the rest of my body. I get joint aching, swelling, water retention, respiratory, like my chest, all the inflammation goes right into my chest, which is crazy. It's like, if you're really paying attention, it's like, where are these transitioning into?
Yeah, absolutely. And to the pitcher analogy or the cup analogy, like people don't think about how also exercise contributes to that stress, albeit it's a good stress, but you have all these things kind of out of control. And then here you are overtraining on top of that, doing
Mhm.
the 5-hour workouts or whatever it may be. Some people,
Yeah.
they think of exercise as more is better, more is always better. And it's like,
Yep.
the older I get, man, my workouts, they're usually about an hour, but sometimes 45 minutes. And it's like, I used to be that person that did 2-hour, 3-hour workouts, and I didn't feel good. I did not feel good when I was doing that. And so like now I feel better than I've ever felt, and I'm doing less, and paying more attention to my stress and all that stuff that you were mentioning as well.
Yeah. Very mindful, very demure.
Oh boy, here we go. Well, that's great. And by the way, like, go off. I love it. Um, so
Got
transitioning,
so much and too much to add, but I have to
yeah,
cut
it's all
this up
good.
so much.
That's the fun part for me. But yeah, so couple more things I want to touch on. So firstly, what were your thoughts on the Tyson Jake Paul match?
Oh man, how many people have hit me up about this? Like, if
I bet.
I've had to like weed out my DMs because everyone's just like, what is going on here? And then on top of that, they're like, how controversial is the Amanda Serrano Katie Taylor fight? Um, so there's I this is how I put it. I'm a boxing purist. Even so, like I even did Team Combat League over the summer, and which is not a traditional boxing thing. And even originally, I was like hesitant to do it because it's something that's not, because I'm such a boxing purist. I'm like, oh, well, like boxing has to be this way. Um, yes, and I'm always going to hold that close to my heart. Uh, but at the end of the day, boxing is also entertainment because all of sports are entertainment. And everyone, see, there's so many of the purists that are like, oh, Jake Paul, like, he's adulterating the sport and blah, blah, blah. And um, yes, but no. At the end of the day, what he's doing is actually creating revenue and viewership from areas that may never, I mean, these are pockets of community that were never touched before. Gaming community, CrossFit community, people that had never even watched boxing before. The viewership was absolutely outrageous. And so I'm for anything that brings more people to the sport. And as far as like Mike Tyson goes, I've had people be like, do you think it was rigged? Um, or do you think he wasn't going to get paid if he knocked Jake out? And I think that that's illegal. It was also like, I don't think that they would have done that. It was commissioned and sanctioned by the Texas Commission. So what I really think is that they had an agreement that Mike Tyson's a fucking legend. Um, it would not have gone over well to be able to take advantage of him. Nobody wanted to see that done. And I think they kind of had an agreement, and this is obviously my own personal opinion, to keep each other alive for the 8 rounds. Let's give a show.
Yeah.
Let's have Mike, like, this is his moment. This is showcasing boxing. This is bringing viewership in. He trained really freaking hard. He actually almost like died earlier in the year. He had like, what was it, 5 blood transfusions or something like that due
I
to
didn't hear
his,
about that. I
yeah, I
missed that.
think he also has ulcerative colitis, and he had such bad stomach ulcers that he got a really bad infection and ended up having like 5 blood transfusions because the fight was supposed to happen July 20th. So, and it got pushed to November because of this. I mean, and it wasn't publicized, but there's been information that, I mean, he's been more public about it now that the fight's over. He had just said that he had had stomach ulcers, and people kind of poo-pooed on him. They're like, oh, he's old, blah, like he just, the fight's not going to end up happening. But no, man, he was like fighting for his life there for a while. So to see
Yeah.
him rebound from that in less than 6 months is just such a testament of like what a freaking animal Mike Tyson really is. Like, the dude's a beast. So I really think that it was like, I think it was an agreement between the two of them that, and you can see that Mike had kind of faded out in those later rounds, and Jake could have taken advantage, but he didn't, like he kept the pace going, kept it interesting. So I think that's like my full analytical take on it, was let's not ruin the image of somebody, and let's not be disrespectful. I mean, everyone already has their opinions on Jake, but yeah, I'm happy with what I saw for sure. And Jake and Mike's wild, walking around in the locker room, just with no underwear on. That was just like, I don't know if anybody saw that. I was like, this guy is amazing. Like that was like the highlight of my evening. I was like, this is so great. So
Yeah. No, I love that framing that they wanted to keep each other alive, like they didn't want to harm each other, and also at the same time they didn't want to embarrass each other. Like
correct.
Tyson did
Yeah.
fade, but also earlier in the fight, and this is where people are kind of, the conspiracy theory is that he threw the fight, but there were points
Where he
where
could have
it did.
got him. Yeah.
Oh man, like he was definitely pulling some punches, but I like the
Yeah.
framing that it's like he could have killed him. Like some of those
Yeah.
punches that it looked like he was pulling, like they would have landed flush with his jaw and it would have been it, And so
Yep.
I do like the framing, and I like that you're talking about putting eyeballs on the sport, bringing money to the sport, and Jake Paul, to that point, he did the same thing with the UFC, where he started kind of shining a light on like, hey, these UFC fighters are underpaid, and trying to get some of them to come out to boxing and stuff like that. And I think because he did that, Dana White and other UFC fighters started to talk more about that, and you saw their pay go up,
Yeah.
which I think was a good thing, because in the beginning, especially of their careers, and I'm sure with boxing is exactly the same, if not worse, you're not paid hardly anything, and
Yeah.
you're out
I mean,
there risking your life.
especially if you are the one that they're promoting, it's crazy. The opponents are usually getting paid more than you are, and obviously like I will never take a true B-side opponent ever. Like, I mean, even in my pro debut, I took on a veteran. Like I want somebody with experience. She had a world title opportunity like in May. That's the type of opponent that I want, but it is an A and a B side. Like it's the person who's signed with the promotion, the person who's brought in, that's coming to fight. And again, like I will never take somebody that is not going to push me. Like I'm looking for big fights because that's the type of athlete I am, and I'm here with the skill level. So let's go, let's climb and let's do this. But with that, it's like these people are usually the person who's being offered the contract is usually getting paid more than the one that's being promoted, which is crazy, and it's even like Jake during one of Amanda's first fights, like he boosted her pay to like 500,000, and gave her, I think it was like she was getting paid like 50, which is still amazing for women. And he gave her like 500,000 or something to put her at 500,000, which was the most paid purse. And that was just like 3 years ago. And then you fast forward to 3 years from then, to now, and her and Katie Taylor had a split purse, meaning that they both made the same amount, for at 6 million. And I said this before, I'm like, okay, 6 million, like you guys could have made it 10 and just like really blown everything out of the water, like all the stats. But 6 million's great. Obviously, Jake and Mike made 40 and 20 million. So
Yeah.
put that, do with that what you will. But yeah, I mean, Jake has done a lot to be able to allow people to be able to kind of even take it out of his own money to push the purse amounts to make this a livable wage. I mean, this sport is dangerous. Combat sports are dangerous. And what the amount of effort, sacrifice, time, and the amount of money that we put into allowing ourselves the recovery modalities, the training modalities, the nutrition, is a ton of money. And a lot of times it's like, people are fighting for $1,500, $3,000. Like $3,000 doesn't even cover a month of training expenses. Like, who the hell can even live on $3 right now? Like you're
Yeah.
looking at the inflation rate. So he's done a lot to be able to actually push pay, and help bridge, like boost that gap, or well, shorten that gap for women, on the pay scale.
Yeah.
So
It's definitely moving in the
yeah.
right direction for sure.
I mean, hey, like, yeah, if you're creating more money in the sport, like, let's go.
Yeah, absolutely. PEDs, how
Okay.
prevalent are they in boxing? Or have you come across people that have been popped, or would you say that for the most part, people are pretty, on the up and up?
Yeah, on the amateur side, I would say that VADA or we'll use SADA in the US and the anti-doping agencies for each country, I would like to say that they're doing their work, especially post the 2018 Russian systemic doping scandal that they had,
Yeah.
which was just insane. But I think that that event really pushed along the anti-doping agencies in each country for validity and just making sure that there's they're really doing their job across the board. I mean, obviously, there's going to be people out there. People do all kinds of crazy stuff. I really, really, truly am an advocate of clean sport. I believe that most of the things that you need can be found in Whole Foods. And I'm especially have been trying to bridge a deal with Thorne supplements because they're scientifically backed. They do all, there's such a great, they have such a great research team and a lot of their supplements are all NSF certified. So, I really like try to ensure that all aspects of any type of supplement that I might be taking or the foods that I'm intaking, um, are clean. But I mean, again, like we just saw it on the pro side. I mean, all that garbage that happened with, Ryan Garcia, crazy. I mean, it
Uh,
just like, and I'm not
Out of
sure.
nowhere.
Yeah, like that was, and I'm not entirely sure. I think, obviously he's on suspension for a year. I'm not sure. Obviously, what happens is that within each testing pool, pro or amateur, each athlete has what's called strict liability, meaning that we are strictly liable for anything that is injected, ingested, or placed on our skin, whether that's creams,
Mhm.
the things that we eat, drink, yada, yada, even eye drops. So anything that can be placed on or in our bodies, we have strict liability for. So, I mean, he was obviously either found, I'm not sure what the findings were, if he was found at fault or not, but it's, I, there seems to be an air of listening to people to tell you to do something, at least on that side, that's how that was spun, that he was advised. And again, this will be my advice to any person, whether it's an athlete or not. Always ask why. This is your body and there's long-term effects to doing anything. Do you want the quick fame now or do you want to be crippled when you're 45 years old? And even so, like if you take care of your system well, the system will be running efficiently for a long time for you. So yeah, I mean, I would say that I feel like they do their best between blood testing, but obviously at a lower level, there's not as much, like, unless you're going for a title fight, there's not as much drug testing. So, which always makes me nervous. But I mean, I sparred Russians right after after that doping scandal. And it's just like, may your skill always outweigh, the PEDS.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, seriously. But yeah,
Yeah.
I
Okay.
don't know if that answered
Um,
that well enough,
no,
but
yeah, that was great. That was great. No worries. Do you have any last messages to aspiring female athletes in any sport, just in general?
yeah, I mean, I think that my biggest message for all of my ladies out there is, I mean, a smart athlete is one of the most dangerous athletes that you'll ever have. Do the research for yourself. Don't just listen to the advice that you're given. Ask why. Be educated in the things that be in the driver's seat of your experience. It's so freaking important. It's empowering to know why you're doing things. And also to be able to think for yourself. I think that that's most important. If I've learned anything from my journey thus far, which has made me a much better freaking athlete and one of the top in the world, is that I advocate for myself and I think for myself and keep people around you that want to also foster that. People who they love what they do so much that they want you to know about it too. So always do the research, always think for yourself and, enjoy the ride and really start to like look at the big picture. And if you're not enjoying, at least a third, 2/3 of the time what you're doing, then like find better people, and look at your situation, because this is about you and it's your life. So freaking enjoy it. Yeah.
Yeah, right
So
on. And
that's
by the
all I
way, that
got.
yeah, and that goes for careers too, by the way, passion,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah, everything. Dude, we're here for a freaking blink of the eye within the universe. You know, just we're literally here for just a moment in time and based on how old the universe is. So like enjoy that ride 100%, be joyful and have a freaking awesome time doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, go ahead and shout out your socials and then any other like projects that you're working on or just stuff you want people to know about.
Yeah, for sure. Looking at fight dates, January or mid-February. So stay tuned for that. I'm always going to post stuff on my social media. You can follow me on Instagram at that's the number one, MOORE_round. Or all of my social media links are actually on my webpage. It's just ameliamoreboxing.com. And if you ever forget that, just put Amelia Moore in your Google search and put boxing in there and you'll find me. But yeah, I run all my own social media. So if you guys ever have any questions, feel free to hit me up.
Yeah, and I thought that was a great post that you put in your story. By the way, you hit 5,000, and you're like, you have a personal connection to some level with all of those people, and
Yeah.
that's very rare. A lot of people have no idea who's following them.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy. I had somebody hit me up that I met in a gym, I think in Utah. And he was like, "Do you remember me?" I was like, "Yeah, you and your friend are the guys who do the handstands." Like, and he was just like, "Can't believe you remembered me." So, but yeah, it's like, you know what I mean? You got to have connection. I'm here. I hate when people are like, "Oh, my followers." Like that is so culty and kind of gross to me. These are my friends. This is my community. I'm building a tribe, of empowered, beautiful, strong, awesome fucking people. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, count me in. Well, Amelia, thank you so much. You are my first podcast guest, so I really appreciate you giving me the time. We went a whole hour. That was pretty awesome. But yeah, my name is Randall James, and this is the Always Adaptive Podcast, episode 2. And you can follow me at Always Adaptive on X, Threads, Instagram, and TikTok. My website is alwaysadaptive.com, and I will see you at the next one.